And continuing from where we were. So Shaunaka just asked Sutta, what was the motive of Shuka in wanting to learn this huge work, since he generally had no interest in the world and was absorbed in inner meditation? So Sutta replied, even sages who delight in the self alone, and the knot of whose ignorance has been cut asunder, practice disinterested devotion to Sri Hari. Such are his virtues. This was true all the more of the divine sage Shukadeva, son of Badarayana, that's another name of Vedavyasa, and the beloved of Lord Vishnu's own people, who studied this great chronicle every day, his mind having been captivated by Sri Hari's excellences. And then he gets to a previous question they had asked him and says, I shall now tell you the story of the birth, exploits, and emancipation of the royal sage Parikshit and the ascent of Pandu's sons to heaven, inasmuch as they serve as a prelude to the story of Sri Krishna. When in course of the Mahabharata war, the warriors of the Kaurava and Pandava hosts had fallen like heroes, and when Duryodhana, son of Dhritarashtra, had his thigh broken by a stroke of the mace dealt by Bhima, who had the appetite of a wolf, probably because it called him Vrakodara. Bhima was often called Vrakodara, which means wolf belly. Ashvatthama, the son of Drona, severed the heads of Draupadi's sons while they were asleep and presented them to Duryodhana, an act which he imagined would please his master, but which really proved most distasteful to him, since everybody would strongly condemn such an odious act. Sore distressed at the news of the terrible slaughter of her sons, their mother, Draupadi, bitterly wailed, her eyes blinded with tears. Then Arjuna, who had a many-pointed diadem on his head, comforting her, said, then alone shall I have wiped your tears, my good lady, when I cut off the head of that fallen Brahmana, that desperado with the arrows discharged from my Gandiva bow, and present it to you so that you may set your foot on it and then bathe after the cremation of your sons. That fallen Brahmana is, of course, Ashvatthama, the killer in this case. Having thus consoled his wife in sweet and charming words, Arjuna, who had Sri Krishna for his friend and charioteer, put on his armor and, taking his fierce bow, rode in a chariot with an ensign bearing the figure of a monkey, the figure of Hanuman, in pursuit of Ashvatthama, who was his own guru's son. When Ashvatthama, who is now sad at heart for his having assassinated young boys, he regrets it, saw from a distance that Arjuna was rushing towards him, he ran for his life in a chariot as far as he could on earth, even as the sun god fled for fear of Rudra. This is a reference to another story. When he saw that his horses were fatigued and that he had none to protect him, that son of a Brahmana thought of the missile presided over by Brahma the Creator as the only means to save his life, even though he did not know how to withdraw the missile, in other words, how to call it back once it had been loosed. He sipped a little water, and finding his life in peril, fitted that missile to his bow with an attentive mind. A fierce flame blazed forth from the missile and enveloped all sides. When Arjuna saw the danger to his life, because this divine weapon was being invoked against him, he addressed Vishnu, in the form of Krishna, his charioteer, as follows. Krishna, Krishna, mighty of arm and the allayer of devotees' fear, you are the only rescuer of those who are incessantly burning with the agony of transmigration. You are God himself, the primal person, existing beyond Prakriti. Casting aside Maya by the power of your wisdom, you stand in your absolute being. It is you who, by virtue of your own power, conferred dharma and other forms of blessings on the soul whose mind is deluded by your Maya. Even so, this avatara of yours is intended to relieve the burden of the earth and to serve as an object of constant meditation for your own people as well as for those who are exclusively devoted to you. O self-effulgent Lord, I know not what and whence this most frightful flame which is enveloping me on all sides. Sri Bhagavan replied, it is no other than the missile presided over by Brahma and released by Ashvatthama in extreme peril. You are aware he knows not how to call it back. There is no other missile that can overpower it. Therefore, quench the formidable flame of this weapon by a counterflame of the same missile, expert as you are in the use of weapons. Sutta continued, on hearing the Lord's words, Arjuna, the exterminator of rival warriors, sipped a little water, went round the Lord in reverence, and fitted a Brahmastra, the weapon of Brahma, to repulse the Brahmastra discharged by Ashvatthama. The two flames, surrounded by arrows, joined each other, and filling the heavens as well as the space between heaven and earth, swelled like the sun and the fire at the time of universal destruction. Perceiving the mighty flame of the two missiles, which was consuming all the three worlds, all the people who were being scorched by their heat thought it to be the fire of universal destruction. Seeing the distress of the people and the impending destruction of all the worlds, and finding the approval of Sri Krishna, Arjuna withdrew them both. Then he quickly seized the hard-hearted son of Kripi, that's Ashvatthama, who he had been pursuing, his eyes burning with rage, and bound him with a rope as one would bind a sacrificial animal. Having forcibly bound the enemy with a rope, he was about to take him to his camp, when the lotus-eyed Lord, Krishna, said to him in a rage, Arjuna, you ought not to spare him. Do kill this fallen Brahmana, who murdered at dead of night innocent boys buried in sleep. A pious man would never kill an enemy who is drunk, unguarded, insane, asleep, tender of age, stupid, terror-stricken, or fallen at his feet, nor would he kill a woman or one who has lost one's chariot. But to slay this merciless wretch who maintains his own life at the cost of another's is to do him good, for the man would otherwise repeat such crimes and thereby precipitate his fall. Moreover, you gave your word to Draupadi within my hearing. I shall bring you the head of the man who has slain your sons, O proud lady. Therefore, O valiant Arjuna, dispose of this sinful ruffian who has murdered your own sons. This unworthy member of his race has done something which was loathsome even to his master Duryodhana. Urged in these words by Sri Krishna, who is putting his righteousness to the test, the great Arjuna, the son of Kunti, would not slay Ashvatthama, his guru's son, even though he had murdered his own sons. Then, coming up to his camp, Arjuna, who had Sri Govinda for his friend and charioteer, showed Ashvatthama to his beloved consort, who had been grieving all the while for her murdered sons. Looking intently at Ashvatthama, who had been brought in that plight, bound with cords like a sacrificial beast, his face cast down on account of his shameful act, Draupadi, who was tender by nature, took compassion on the offender and bowed to him. That noble lady could not bear to see him brought in bondage and said, let him be freed, let him be released, Brahmana that he is, and worthy of our utmost adoration. That worshipful Drona, by whose grace you learnt the science of archery with its manifold secrets and acquired the knowledge of the various missiles, as well as how to discharge and call them back. It is he himself who is present in the person of his progeny, his wife, his better half, Kripi, a sister of Acharya Kripa, another preceptor of the Pandavas, yet survives. She did not follow him only because of her having given birth to a valiant son. Therefore, my blessed Lord, in other words, Ashvatthama is the only person who she has left to care about in life after her husband was killed. Therefore, my blessed Lord, the family of your preceptor, which is ever worthy of adoration and salutation for you, does not deserve persecution at your hands, pious as you are. Let not Ashvatthama's mother, Gautami, who worshipped her husband as a deity, wail, even as I do, grieved at the loss of my children, and shedding tears again and again. The whole family of those princes of unconquered mind by whom the Brahmana race is angered is plunged in grief and is soon burnt up with all their kith and kin. Sutta went on, King Yudhishthira, the son of Dharma, O holy Brahmanas, greeted the queen's words, which were pious and fair, compassionate, guileless, impartial, and noble. Nakula and Sahadeva, Yuyudhana, who's also known as Satyaki, Arjuna, the divine Sri Krishna himself, and all other men and women who happened to be there, endorsed what she said. On that occasion, Bhima indignantly said, for him who wantonly murdered sleeping youngsters without any gain either to himself or to his master, death has been declared as a boon. Hearing the words of Bhima as well as of Draupadi, Lord Sri Krishna, who is distinguished by his 4 arms, looked into the face of his friend Arjuna and uttered the following words as though smiling. Sri Krishna said, even a fallen Brahmana ought not to be slain, and a ruffian surely deserves to be killed. Both these precepts have been taught by me in the scriptures. Therefore, carry out both these commands of mine. Redeem the promise you made while consoling your beloved consort. At the same time, do it as agreeable to Bhimasena and Draupadi, as well as to myself. In other words, challenges him to please everyone. Arjuna instantly understood the mind of Srihari, and with his sword cut off the gem on the Brahmana's head, along with his locks of hair. It's I should point out here, Ashvatthama was born with a gem like grown into his head, like a supernatural feature. So Arjuna cut the gem off of his head as well as cut off his hair. Releasing Ashvatthama, who had been bound with cords and put out of countenance by the murder of boys, and who was now deprived of his splendor and his gem also, Arjuna expelled him from his camp. Shaving the head is a token of disgrace, seizure of property, and expulsion from a place where one happens to be. This is the form of capital punishment prescribed for fallen Brahmanas. There is no other corporeal form of capital punishment for them. The sons of Pandu, along with Krishna, so not Krishna, but Krishna with a long final vowel, is a name of Draupadi, who were all stricken with grief at the loss of their sons, performed the cremation and other funeral rites in respect of their departed kinsmen. Discourse 8. The Lord delivers Parikshit in the womb and is extolled by Kunti. Yudhishthira gives way to grief. Sutta says, placing the ladies at the head and accompanied by Sri Krishna, they all then repaired to the bank of the Ganga in order to offer oblations of water to their departed kinsmen seeking such oblations. Having offered water to the deceased and bitterly wept for them, they all immersed themselves once more in the water of the Ganga that had been hallowed by contact with the dust of Sri Hari's lotus feet, showing how all created beings are subject to death which cannot be averted. Lord Madhava, that's Krishna, and the sages Dhaumya and others consoled King Yudhishthira, the lord of the Kurus, and his younger brothers. Dhritarashtra and his wife, Gandhari, daughter of the king of Gandhara, who was stricken with grief at the loss of her sons, as well as Pritha, that's Kunti, the Pandava's mother, or three of the Pandava's mother, and Krishna, Draupadi, all of whom had lost their kith and kin and were sitting there plunged in grief. Having secured to King Yudhishthira, to whom no enemy was ever born, in other words, who was too good to regard anyone as his enemy, having secured to him his own kingdom that had been usurped by gamblers and brought about the destruction of wicked kings whose span of life had been cut short by touching Draupadi's hair. That's a reference to a time when they grabbed her and dragged her by her hair before a court and tried to strip her naked. So because of their sinful acts, their span of life had been cut short. And having helped him to perform as many as 3 Ashvamedha sacrifices with the best possible materials and with the aid of the best available priests, he caused his sacred renown to spread in all directions like that of Indra, who won the throne of Indra by performing 100 Ashvamedha sacrifices. Having taken leave of Pandu's sons and paid his respect to holy Brahmanas like Dvaipayana Vyasa, who did their homage to him in return, he mounted his chariot, Krishna did, and was just intending to leave for Dwaraka, his city on the west coast of what is today Gujarat, along with Satyaki and Uddhava, his friends, when, O Shaunaka, he perceived Uttara, the widow of Abhimanyu, Arjuna's deceased son, rushing towards him, stricken with fear. And Uttara said, protect me, O great yogi, save me, O supreme deity. O Lord of the universe, I see no asylum other than you in this world, where everyone is death to another. This dart of burning steel is pursuing me, O Almighty Lord. Let it burn me by all means, my master, but let it not kill the child in my womb. Sutta says, hearing her words, the Lord, who is so fond of his devotees, understood that it was a missile discharged by Ashvatthama in order to exterminate the line of the Pandavas. That very moment, O chief of the sages, the sons of Pandu also saw 5 burning shafts coming towards them, and took up their own missiles. Perceiving the calamity of his kinsmen, who thought of none else than him, the Almighty Lord protected them with his own discus, Sudarshana, his chakram. Srihari, the master of yoga, who is the very self dwelling in the heart of all living beings, enveloped the womb of Uttara, the daughter of King Virata, by his own Maya in order to preserve the line of Kuru. Even though the missile presided over by Brahma is unfailing and irresistible, it proved ineffectual when it met the effulgence of Bhagavan Vishnu, O chief of the Bhrigus. Deem this not as a miracle on the part of Lord Achyuta, that's Krishna, who is an embodiment of all wonders, and who, though unborn himself, creates, maintains, and destroys this universe by his own deluding potency. When Sri Krishna was about to leave, the virtuous Prita, along with her sons the Pandavas, who had just escaped from the fire of the missile presided over by Brahma, and her daughter-in-law, Krishna, Draupadi, addressed him as follows. Kunti said, I, an ignorant woman, make obeisance to you, the prime person, transcending Prakriti and dwelling inside as well as outside all created beings, the invisible and imperishable God existing beyond the range of sense perception and screened by the curtain of Maya. You cannot be seen by a man of perverted vision, even as a dunce would fail to recognize an actor appearing in a garb appropriate to the stage. How then can we womenfolk perceive you who have appeared in our midst just to engender devotion in the heart of Paramahansas, who are given to contemplation and pure of mind? Obeisance, obeisance to you, Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, the delight of Devaki, your blessed mother, the foster child of the cowherd Nanda, Lord Govinda. Obeisance to you whose navel is adorned with a lotus. Obeisance to you wearing a wreath of lotus flowers. Obeisance to you possessing lotus-like eyes. Obeisance to you whose feet resemble the lotus. O Hrishikesha, lord of the senses, even as you delivered Devaki, your own mother, who had been shut up in prison for a long time by the wicked Kansa and was overcome with grief, so did you, O Almighty Lord, repeatedly save me, along with my sons, from a series of calamities. It is you, O Hari, who protected us from poison, from a huge fire, from the look of man-eating demons, from the assembly of wicked people, Duryodhana and his associates, from the perils met during forest life, from the missiles of many a great warrior, in every battle, and just now from the missile discharged by Ashvatthama. May calamities befall us at every step through eternity, O teacher of the world, for it is in adversity alone that we are blessed with your sight, which eliminates the possibility of our seeing another birth. In this, she's making a reference to that Krishna kept showing up to save them. And so she's praising him by saying, may we keep needing you to come save us so that we get to keep seeing you. A man whose birth, power, learning, and affluence only serve to swell his pride is unable even to utter your name, you being open to the perception of only those who have nothing to call their own. You are the only wealth of those who have no sense of possession. Beyond the realm of the 3 gunas or modes of Prakriti, you delight in your own self and are perfectly calm. You are the Lord of Moksha. I bow to you again and again. I believe you to be Kala, the time spirit, the almighty ruler of all, having no beginning or end and moving alike among all the creatures, although it is you again who serve as an occasion for them to contend with one another. None, O Lord, can know what you intend doing when you are acting like men. No one is ever dear or loathsome to you. It is men alone who think of you in terms of diversity. O Lord, you are the soul of the universe, nay, the universe itself. You are, as a matter of fact, devoid of birth and actions. Your birth and actions in the subhuman species, as well as among men, rishis, and aquatic creatures, are mere sport. When you offended your foster mother Yashoda by smashing the pot of curds, and she took a cord to bind you, the way in which you stood full of fear, with your face cast down, your eyes rolling about in confusion, and their collyrium, the eyeliner Krishna was wearing, dissolved in tears, fills me with bewilderment. To think that even he of whom fear itself is afraid should appear so stricken with fear. Some people aver that, though unborn, you have appeared in the race of your beloved Yadu, of sacred renown, just in order to enhance his glory. Yadu was an ancestor of Krishna, the body that Krishna took in his avatar. Even as a sandal tree takes root on the Malaya mountain in order to bring reputation to the latter. The Malaya mountain is part of the Western Ghats down in southwest India. Others declare that, though birthless, you were born of Devaki, Vasudeva's wife, for the protection of this world and the extermination of the enemies of gods, as solicited by the couple in their previous existence. Still others assert that in response to the prayer of Brahma, the self-born creator, you have appeared in our midst to relieve the burden of the earth, which was groaning under a heavy load like a vessel sinking in the sea. Some others maintain that you have descended on earth with the intention of performing deeds fit to be heard of or dwelt upon by those who are being tormented in this world by ignorance, desire, and selfish acts. That is why your devotees constantly listen to, sing, repeat to others, and contemplate on your stories and rejoice. And it is they alone who behold before long your lotus feet that put an end to the stream of births and deaths. O Lord, you have always granted the wishes of your own people. It is a fact, then, that you intend this very day to leave us, your relations, who exclusively depend on you and who have no asylum other than your lotus feet, having alienated other monarchs by inflicting suffering on them. When you are out of sight, the Yadus and ourselves, the Pandavas, are of no more consequence in name or form than the senses when their ruler, the soul, has quitted them. This earth will not look so bright then, O wielder of a mace, as it does now, adorned by your footprints, which are easily distinguished by their characteristic marks, because there are certain marks on the bottom of Krishna's feet, of a lotus, a thunderbolt, a banner, and a goad, etc. There's a whole list of them. These territories, so highly prosperous and so rich in their rice crops and vegetation, as well as these woodlands and hills, rivers and oceans, flourish only under your benign looks. O Lord, you are not only the ruler and the soul of the universe, but the universe itself. Kindly cut asunder the strong bond of affection that binds me with my own people, the Pandus and the Vrishnis. Even as the Ganga incessantly pours its waters into the ocean, so let my thought, O Lord of the Madhus, constantly and exclusively find delight in you. O glorious Krishna, friend of Arjuna, foremost among the Vrishnis, you are fire, as it were, to burn the whole race of princes who are proving the bane of the earth. Your prowess is infinite, Govinda. Your descent on this earth is intended only to relieve the distress of the cows, the brahmanas, and the gods. Obeisance to you, O master of yoga, O divine teacher of the universe. Sutta went on. In this way, when Prita extolled in sweet words the consummate glory of Lord Vaikunta, Sri Krishna, he gently smiled as if bewitching her by his Maya. So be it, said Sri Krishna, and taking leave of her, entered the city of Hastinapura once again. Then, after bidding adieu to the other ladies as well, he was about to leave for Dvaraka, his own city, when King Yudhishthira detained him out of love. The king, who was seized with remorse for his having been instrumental in bringing about the destruction of his own kinsmen in the war, could not be consoled, even though Vyasa and others who understood the ways of providence, and even Sri Krishna of marvelous deeds, comforted him by means of legends. Brooding over the death of his kinsmen with a bewildered mind, O holy Brahmanas, and overpowered by affection and infatuation, King Yudhishthira, the son of Dharma, said, Oh, look at this ignorance rooted in my heart. Evil-minded as I am, I brought about the destruction of many akshauhinis, in other words, many divisions of the army, for the sake of this body, which is the food of other creatures, such as jackals and dogs. There can be no redemption from hell even after millions and millions of years for me, an enemy of children, brahmanas, my own kith and kin, friends, uncles, cousins, and preceptors. The saving clause found in the scriptures that the destruction of enemies in a righteous war on the part of a monarch seeking the protection of his subjects is no sin, fails to satisfy me. The wrong that I have done in this life to the women folk whose husbands and other relations have been slain by me or on my account, I shall not be able to expiate through sacrificial performances enjoined on a householder. One cannot atone for the destruction of a single life by any number of sacrifices, any more than one can purify muddy water by dissolving more mud into it, or counteract the pollution caused by spirituous liquor by adding more to it. Thus ends the 8th discourse entitled Kunti's Song of Praise and Yudhishthira's Remorse in Book 1 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. So it's a little bit after 10. Do we want to keep going a little bit? What do you guys think?
I mean, that's a lot. What we've covered today is a lot to process already.
Okay.
A lot of amazing, stories and concepts to digest.
Sure. We can
Just in that stint there, but there's never too much too.
Yeah.
Next week also is another Ekadashi, ironically, harmoniously on a Sunday.
Nice. Yeah.
Perfect time.
Yeah, somebody else needs to leave too. So yeah, I think we can probably leave it there and pick up again next week. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Thanks so much, Dave. Hariom.
Hariom. All right. I'll get this posted on YouTube soon and see everyone next week.